Have you ever wondered why certain addictions seem impossible to break, even when we know how much harm they cause? And why, despite countless attempts, relapse keeps happening? The answer isn't just about willpower, but something much deeper, an inner void that insists on being filled. But here's what few people know. Carl Jung discovered that behind every addiction lies a misdirected spiritual thirst. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. The relief is momentary, but the need only intensifies. What you're about to discover in this content could completely transform your relationship with dependency. You'll understand how to identify this inner void, how it manifests in different types of addictions, and most importantly, how to transform this destructive search into a path of healing and self-discovery. If you're tired of fighting something that seems stronger than you, stay until the end, because you'll discover the method Jung used to help his patients find true freedom. Not just stopping the behavior, but healing the root of the problem. Before we continue, I need to share something with you. I dedicate so much time and soul to each piece of content here on this channel. But lately, many subscribers have told us they're not getting notified about new videos like before. I'll be honest, this is a bit discouraging, because I know there are people who really need to hear these messages. So, if you feel our channel has helped you in some way, can I ask you for 3 small things that make a huge difference? Hit the notification bell and select all so you don't miss any new videos. Comment something below, anything at all, even just "I'm here." This shows the algorithm that this video matters. Share this with someone who might need to hear this today. Seriously, this helps me continue, and it helps this message reach those who need it most. Carl Jung had an intriguing and countercultural view for his time. He believed that addiction was more than a lack of control or a matter of discipline. For him, addiction arose from a desperate search for meaning, an attempt to fill the inner void with something that, though illusory, brings a momentary sense of completeness. Instead of seeing addiction as a moral failing, Jung treated it as a deep cry for meaning, a reflection of silent suffering that the soul tries to soothe. He used to say, "Where the soul finds no meaning, the psyche finds despair." It's as if addiction were a reflection of something missing at the core of human being, something that routine or external achievements cannot supply. This is the psyche's attempt to reach something transcendent, something that gives meaning to existence, but through paths that only take us further away from what we truly seek. Addiction is a false solution, an attempt by the mind to escape from an internal disconnection. While other psychological approaches of the time saw addiction only as an emotional or physical disorder, Jungian thinking suggested that instead of focusing exclusively on eliminating addictive behavior, it's important to help the individual find what they're really seeking deep down. Jung emphasized that addiction can only be overcome when the spiritual void is filled by something authentic, something that allows a real reconnection with one's own soul. He proposed that instead of fighting addiction as if it were an enemy, a person should see this compulsion as a cry for help from their own psyche, an attempt to indicate that something is out of balance and needs attention. From this approach, Jung helped develop a more compassionate and less punitive understanding of addiction. I suggest you pause for a moment and ask yourself, what am I really seeking when I surrender to this behavior? Am I trying to fill something that seems unreachable? This was Jung's proposal. For him, this questioning is the starting point for understanding addiction as a manifestation of a deeper longing, a thirst for something missing at the core of being. Instead of fleeing or repressing this search, Jung suggested facing it and listening to it, allowing addiction to become a starting point for the search for true meaning. But Jung knew that this search for meaning would still need clearer direction, or it would fall into a vicious cycle. He believed that spiritual emptiness was the root of the problem, and that until it was understood and filled, it would continue to cause the suffering of addiction. The human soul, when wounded, develops sophisticated mechanisms of protection and survival. These mechanisms, which Jung called complexes, are like autonomous personalities within us that take control in moments of vulnerability. They are born from traumas, disappointments, and unhealed emotional wounds, and operate independently of our conscious will. In the context of dependencies, these complexes manifest as compulsive patterns that promise protection against pain, but end up perpetuating suffering. It's as if the psyche created armor that, while protecting us temporarily, ends up becoming a prison that prevents us from experiencing life fully. Jung identified that there exists a primordial wound in the human condition, a void that cannot be filled by anything external, but which we continually try to supply through inadequate means. This void is an inherent characteristic of the experience of being alive and conscious. It's the price we pay for our capacity to question, to seek meaning, to yearn for something greater than ourselves. This primordial void manifests in different ways throughout life. In childhood, it may appear as an inexplicable sensation that something is missing, even in loving homes. In adolescence, it emerges as a deep restlessness that no activity can calm. In adult life, it transforms into a persistent sensation that, despite all achievements, life lacks real substance. What makes this void so dangerous is its capacity to disguise itself. It hides behind excessive ambitions, compulsive needs for approval, obsessive relationships, and all sorts of behaviors that appear to be conscious choices, but are actually unconscious attempts to fill this fundamental gap. When this void is not recognized and honored for what it is, a doorway to the sacred, it becomes an abyss that devours everything we try to throw into it. Comment below about when in your life your addiction manifested, so we can understand at which stage this void transformed into dependency. For Jung, addiction didn't arise only from conscious desires, but also from deep forces of the unconscious that shape our choices in invisible ways. The personal and collective unconscious, where memories, traumas, and the archetypes we inherit culturally reside, can profoundly influence our relationship with addiction. Jung believed that when the unconscious is not explored, these aspects of the psyche manifest in our lives, frequently as compulsions and destructive impulses. Understanding addiction meant understanding these hidden forces that inhabit each of us. Among the archetypes that most influence addiction are the shadow and the wounded healer. The shadow represents the aspects we repress or avoid accepting about ourselves. They are fears, desires, and traumas we prefer to keep hidden, but which, when ignored, act autonomously, often leading to compulsive behaviors. The shadow is like a dark mirror, reflecting what we avoid seeing. For those dealing with addiction, the shadow can manifest as an irresistible attraction to behaviors that, deep down, try to relieve repressed pain. It's as if rejected parts of our personality found a way to express themselves through addictive behavior. For example, a person who was taught from an early age to repress their anger might develop addictions that make them feel powerful and uncontrolled, as an unconscious way of expressing this repressed energy. Or someone who learned to hide their vulnerability might seek substances that make them feel invulnerable, even if temporarily. Another relevant archetype is that of the wounded healer. This symbol represents the part of us that has already been wounded and therefore seeks healing, but also carries fragility. In the context of addiction, the wounded healer manifests as an attempt to relieve suffering, even through harmful means. It's as if, in seeking to heal their own wounds, the individual found temporary relief in something that, in the long run, only prolongs the pain. Jung believed that by facing the wounded healer, the individual could recognize that their destructive behavior is not just a habit, but an unconscious attempt to heal traumas and pain. This recognition is fundamental because it allows a more compassionate and less punitive approach to one's own behavior. The archetype of the eternal child also plays an important role. This figure represents the part of us that constantly seeks pleasure, novelty, and avoids responsibilities. In the context of addiction, the eternal child can manifest as a search for experiences that keep the person in a perpetual state of euphoria and escape from the demands of adult life. People dominated by this archetype may develop addictions to extreme experiences, gambling, casual relationships, or anything that promises to keep them in a state of constant excitement. It's as if they were always fleeing adult reality, seeking to maintain themselves in a state of innocence and irresponsibility. The archetype of the inner orphan represents a deep sensation of abandonment and helplessness. People influenced by this archetype may develop addictions that promise to fill a void of love and care. Codependent relationships, approval addictions, or behaviors that make the person feel special or loved can be manifestations of this pattern. These archetypes act as invisible forces, shaping decisions and behaviors in subtle but constant ways. Often, a person may feel an inexplicable attraction to situations that reinforce their pain or self-criticism, without understanding that these patterns come from the depths of the unconscious. Jung said that the unconscious always seeks balance, even if, on the surface, its actions seem disordered. In other words, he believed that addictions represent a request from the unconscious to bring to light rejected parts of our psyche that need to be seen and understood. For Jung, exploring these archetypes was not just an intellectual exercise, but an essential step for transformation. He suggested that practices like active imagination, where the individual visualizes and interacts with these archetypal figures, can bring powerful insights about oneself. By dialoguing with their shadows and wounds, the individual learns to integrate these aspects, weakening the power of addiction. Instead of fighting against these repressed parts, they begin to welcome them, opening the way for a healthier relationship with their own mind. This journey of self-knowledge is challenging, because descending into the depths of the unconscious is like exploring a dark and unknown cave. But Jung believed that it was in this process of discovery that true freedom from addiction resides. By transforming the unconscious into something conscious, the individual gains control over their choices and finds new paths to personal satisfaction. The individuation process was, for Jung, one of the keys to overcoming addiction. He saw individuation as a deep path of self-knowledge, in which the individual seeks to integrate all parts of their psyche, the conscious and unconscious, virtues and shadows, strengths and weaknesses. This is a gradual but transformative process in which the person stops seeing addiction as a simple behavior to be avoided and begins to see it as a reflection of something deeper. Jung believed that individuation creates a solid foundation for internal freedom, a stability that liberates the individual from the need to seek external fulfillment. Acceptance is the starting point for individuation. For someone dealing with addiction, this means observing and accepting their own impulses instead of fighting them blindly. Jung defended that to transform something, you must first embrace it. He used to say that what we deny in ourselves gains power over us. For Jung, looking at addiction with honesty, without guilt, without self-punishment, but with genuine curiosity, allows the individual to understand what lies behind their desires. In individuation, the person begins to explore what they truly value and desire for themselves. By unraveling these layers, they discover what is essential and what is transitory. For those struggling with addiction, this means shifting focus from momentary satisfactions to what provides growth and fulfillment. Jung believed that meaningful activities, whether artistic, intellectual, or even spiritual, offer more authentic and lasting satisfaction. Someone on a quest for individuation can, for example, explore new interests that connect them with themselves and their essence. An artistic hobby, like painting or music, or even contact with nature, can offer a new perspective on what is truly gratifying. These activities not only distract from compulsion, but nourish aspects of personality that were repressed or neglected. Another effect of individuation is the strengthening of emotional resilience. Jung said that by integrating aspects that were repressed, the individual gains internal stability, their own center of gravity that allows them to resist external impulses. This is especially valuable for someone in addiction recovery, as it confers a sense of autonomy, of being in control of their own life. Individuation helps build this autonomy, where the individual feels that regardless of what happens around them, they possess a firm foundation within themselves. Additionally, the individuation process brings a sense of completeness that increases self-confidence. Jung believed that true security doesn't lie in denying or hiding flaws, but in accepting them as essential parts of one's own being. By doing this, the individual finds an inner peace that eliminates the need to seek external satisfactions to fill emotional gaps. This integration promotes well-being that strengthens the capacity to resist addiction, as the individual becomes less dependent on external escapes to find comfort or satisfaction. Jung emphasized that the individuation process is continuous, work that never ends. He described this as a constant transformation, in which the human being shapes and evolves. For those facing addiction, this vision offers a horizon, a promise of continuous growth. It's not about a finish line, but about a trail that always leads to new learning and discoveries. And it's in the individuation process that the individual realizes that addiction, though painful, can be a starting point for something greater. A search for a higher meaning. An attempt to connect to a spiritual dimension that brings true and lasting peace. Carl Jung saw addiction as a reflection of a universal human search. The need to feel that there is something greater, something that brings deep and true meaning to life. For Jung, when this need for transcendence is repressed or ignored, it transforms into an impulse that seeks escape in temporary pleasures and compulsive behaviors. It's like trying to see the horizon through a fogged window. What could be a clear journey towards something greater becomes a frustrated attempt to reach something that always seems out of reach. For Jung, this spiritual search didn't need to be linked to formal religious practices, but rather to a personal spirituality that resonated genuinely. He believed that when this type of spirituality is ignored, the internal void tends to grow, generating dissatisfaction that is reflected in addictions. It's as if the psyche tried to fill this space with something, albeit in a disordered way. Jung observed that some of his patients described their experiences with addiction as moments of escape, where they could disconnect from the world and, for an instant, experience elevation. But this relief was temporary, and they soon returned to the sensation of emptiness, a reality that addictions only reinforced. It was as if they were drinking salt water to quench their thirst. Momentary relief only intensified the need. Jung saw spirituality as an essential tool to fill this void in a healthier and more permanent way. Practices of meditation, contemplation, mindfulness, or even the simple habit of reconnecting with nature can offer the individual an experience of peace that doesn't depend on external stimuli. Meditation, for example, allows the person to slow down and observe their thoughts and emotions neutrally, while mindfulness teaches focusing on the present, which helps alleviate the anxiety and craving that feed addiction. These practices bring a state of presence and tranquility that goes beyond the fleeting satisfaction offered by addiction. Jung believed that spiritual reconnection should be practical, rooted in something that brought peace and meaning to each individual's life. For some, this might mean getting involved in charitable activities or helping other people. For others, it could be art, writing, music, or contemplation of something they consider sacred. Dream work was also an important spiritual practice for Jung. He believed that dreams were a form of communication from the unconscious, offering insights about unresolved issues and paths to healing. For people dealing with addictions, dream work can reveal symbols and messages that help understand the deeper roots of their compulsive behaviors. Jung also valued the importance of personal rituals as a way to cultivate the sacred dimension of life. These rituals don't need to be elaborate or formal. They can be as simple as a conscious morning walk, a moment of gratitude before meals, or the practice of writing personal reflections. What's important is that they're performed with intention and reverence, creating moments of connection with something greater than the everyday self. These activities, when performed with intention, nourish the soul and help the person find satisfaction that addiction cannot offer. What's important is that the individual discovers what resonates with them, what makes them feel connected to something greater than their individual existence. Jung's vision of spirituality and addiction directly inspired approaches like the 12-step program, adopted by organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous. The idea of surrendering to a higher power and seeking self-knowledge reflects Jung's proposal that addiction healing involves a spiritual dimension. This is recognition that for many people, the recovery process doesn't depend only on resistance, but on a deep internal change that connects the individual to something more stable and eternal. This path of spirituality is not a quick solution, but a continuous process of reconnection with the essential. For Jung, it's as if addiction were an arrow pointing to a deeper need for transcendence. And for those willing to follow this path, recovery from addiction transforms into a journey of self-discovery and growth. Carl Jung's influence on modern addiction treatment is profound and remarkable. His ideas opened space for therapeutic approaches that, instead of treating only behavior, seek to understand internal motivations and the role of the unconscious in addiction. The most famous example is the 12-step program, adopted by groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. Although Jung didn't create the program, his correspondences and ideas about the role of life meaning and spirituality were fundamental in its elaboration. The 12 steps emphasize acceptance of a higher power and the search for self-knowledge, values that resonate strongly with the Jungian perspective, that addiction relates to a lack of connection with something greater. In the 12-step program, introspection and the process of recognizing behavioral patterns are central. This self-knowledge, an essentially Jungian practice, allows the individual to look at their impulses and recognize their patterns instead of simply fighting against them. Program participants are encouraged to accept their flaws and weaknesses, which is similar to the shadow integration proposed by Jung. This recognition creates an opportunity for the individual to face and understand the deeper aspects of their personality, perceiving addiction as an expression of pain and desires that were often hidden. The correspondence between Jung and Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, demonstrates how Jungian ideas directly influence the program's formation. Beyond the 12 steps, various contemporary therapies incorporate Jungian principles into addiction treatment. Mindfulness-based therapy, for example, promotes acceptance and observation of emotions without judgment, allowing the individual to understand their own reactions and impulses with greater clarity. This practice reflects Jung's view on the importance of not repressing negative emotions, but rather observing and accepting them. By learning to live with these feelings without giving in to addiction, the patient develops a healthier relationship with their own unconscious, gaining control over impulses, acceptance, and commitment. Therapy also aligns with Jungian principles by helping the patient explore their own internal void and find meaning in their life. Instead of fleeing from uncomfortable feelings, the individual is encouraged to explore them and identify what they truly value. This work resonates with Jung's proposal that to overcome addiction, it's essential that the person find an authentic purpose. In clinics and recovery centers, patients are often encouraged to reflect on what truly makes them feel alive and fulfilled. Art therapy, music therapy, and other creative approaches also reflect Jungian influence, recognizing that creativity can be a powerful way to express and integrate unconscious aspects of the psyche. Jung was a pioneer in using creative expression as a therapeutic tool, believing that art allows the unconscious to manifest in ways that can be understood and integrated. Jung also directly influenced the practice of therapies like active imagination, where the patient is encouraged to visualize and dialogue with figures and symbols that arise in their mind. This practice allows the individual to interact directly with archetypes and aspects of the unconscious, bringing to consciousness patterns and behaviors previously hidden. For example, a patient might visualize a symbol of something that causes them anguish and, by confronting it, discover its emotional roots. This type of exercise helps weaken addiction's power, as the individual begins to understand the real causes of their pain. The active imagination technique allows repressed aspects of personality to be recognized and integrated, reducing their unconscious influence on behavior. Jungian therapy also emphasizes the importance of dream work. Dreams are seen as messages from the unconscious that can offer valuable insights about unresolved issues and paths to healing. For people dealing with addictions, dream work can reveal symbols and patterns that help understand the deeper roots of their compulsive behaviors. Recovery centers that adopt Jung-inspired approaches frequently incorporate contemplative practices, work with nature, and exploration of existential questions as part of the healing process. Recognizing that addiction often arises from a crisis of meaning, these approaches help patients find a deeper purpose and connection with something greater than themselves. The integration of these Jungian ideas offers patients a healing process that goes beyond simple abstinence. By exploring the sense of purpose, self-knowledge, and spiritual connection, the individual finds new paths to live fully and satisfactorily. Therapy becomes a process of discovery, where the patient not only stops using substances or compulsive behaviors but develops a deeper understanding of themselves and their motivations. This is the essence of Jung's legacy in modern psychology. He showed that addiction can be an opportunity for growth and reunion with one's own essence. Instead of seeing addiction as just a problem to be eliminated, the Jungian approach sees it as a symptom of deeper needs that, when understood and addressed healthily, can lead to a richer and more meaningful life. The search for healing transforms into a journey of self-discovery, in which the individual discovers inner strengths and resources they might never have known they possessed. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but is a continuous process of growth and integration that can last a lifetime. As we explore Carl Jung's vision of addiction, it becomes clear that he saw it as an expression of an internal void, an unconscious search for meaning and spiritual connection. For Jung, overcoming addiction didn't mean just suppressing impulses or resisting behaviors, but embarking on a process of self-discovery that could transform life authentically and profoundly. From confronting spiritual emptiness to integrating our shadows and archetypes, Jung showed us that the path to healing passes through acceptance and understanding of our own desires and traumas. This process requires courage to face aspects of ourselves we preferred to keep hidden, but also offers the promise of genuine and lasting freedom. The Jungian approach teaches us that each person carries within themselves both the seed of suffering and the key to their own healing. Addiction, though painful and destructive, can become a portal to self-knowledge if we're capable of listening to it with compassion and curiosity. Instead of identifying ourselves as victims of external forces, we can recognize our active role in creating our reality and our capacity to transform it. The spiritual practices, individuation, dream work, active imagination, and all the other tools that Jung developed continue to inspire therapists and people in recovery around the world. They offer a path that goes beyond simple abstinence, directing us toward a life of greater authenticity, purpose, and connection. Jung reminded us that we are beings in search of meaning, and that this search, when honored and consciously directed, can lead us not only to freedom from addiction, but to the discovery of who we really are in our deepest essence. Addiction stops being our enemy and becomes our teacher, showing us exactly where we need to direct our attention and care. Jung's final message is that each of us possesses, in our deepest nature, everything we need to find the way back home, to authentic connection with our own soul. The work isn't easy, but it's deeply rewarding, offering the possibility of a life not only free from addictions, but truly full and meaningful. This is the revolution that Jung brought to the world. The understanding that all human suffering carries within itself the seeds of its own healing, which, though challenging, is also an opportunity to discover the richness and depth of our own human nature. Addiction, paradoxically, can become the starting point for a more conscious life, more integrated and more connected with what truly matters. If you've made it this far, it's because something within you recognized the profound truth of these words from Jung. Perhaps you yourself are facing some type of dependency, or perhaps you know someone who needs to hear this. Tell me here in the comments. What was the most powerful insight you had from this content? Write, "I choose to free myself," and share which part touched you most. I want to know if it was the discovery about spiritual emptiness, the archetypes that control us, or perhaps the individuation process that most resonated with your experience. The transformation that Jung proposed isn't easy, but it's the most rewarding that exists. And if you want to deepen this understanding even further and begin your own journey of self-knowledge, I've prepared something special for you. In the first pinned comment, you'll find our ebook, 21 Days of Transformation with Carl Jung, a practical guide that will accompany you step by step on this path of encounter with your own essence. These are exercises, reflections, and practices based on Jung's teachings that you can apply in your daily life to begin transforming your relationship with any type of dependency. Remember, you're not fighting against something bigger than you. You're learning to listen to what your soul truly needs. A warm embrace, and until the next video.